It is time now to talk about the most famous hook of React, which is useState. The useState hook in React is used to add state to functional components. It returns an array with two elements, the state itself and a function to update that state. In other words, we got the getter to get the actual state, and we got the setter to set the new state. Okay, let's just start with a quick example. Here we've got a JSX component and we've got JavaScript written in here with a variable here, which is basically let name with Guillaume. So we got a name that is displayed in here, and remember previously we created this hero component. So I'm just going to zoom on the home component that we are using now. It will be better for my explanation. Okay, so I got this name, which is down here inside my template. And on JavaScript, what you would do is to attach actually an onClick function that would trigger some changes. So let's say that we would like to change name for John, for instance, every time we click on update name. So if I click here on update name, nothing is happening. Okay? Why? Because here inside this JSX component, there is actually no reactivity right now. And this is what useState is bringing. useState, which comes from React, help us to create reactivity inside our JSX component. But not also. useState help us to preserve the state across render. So if I just put the state in here, I leave and I come back, I will have keep the state. In some cases, we're going to come back to it after. Also, useState help us to manage the component state. Every component got a scope, and in every scope you got its own state. The useState help us to re-render the app. So here when I click on update name, nothing is happening. The application is not re-render. I talk about rendering because when I want to change the name, I want here my HTML file to be updated and to show John when I click on the name. Okay, here it doesn't happen. Also, the last case is to enable actually the dynamic data handling. So here, every time you are going to receive data from a component, from a prop, or from a fetching, for example, you would actually store the data into a useState. Okay, let's continue here on our example. We can see that it doesn't work. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to turn here this name into a useState. So what I can type here is to type useState, which is a function that comes basically from React. So here I can import from React what I can import useState. All right. And once it's done, we are fine. So here, if I put Guillaume inside useState, there we go. We've got hello Guillaume that is written in here. And even if I click, I still click, nothing is happening. So as I told you before, basically, in useState, you've got two things, the getter and the setter. So here I can turn my variable into an array, and I can deconstruct the getter and the setter. So here name is the getter, set name is the setter, right? So I don't need to change anything in my template because name is still the getter. And I just created this set name, which has a different color. We can see it in yellow. I just call it set name because this is the convention. If you got another variable, you can call it its name plus set as a prefix. It's just a convention like this. Okay, so now what I can do is just to click here and to use this set name here. And I'm going to change here set name to John. So I'm using the function set name, the setter, to change hello Guillaume to John on click. So here if I click, we can see that it finally works. We've got hello John that has been rendered. Okay, so here just before, I'm going to console log here render again. Okay, so every time I will click, it will render again actually the whole JSX component. So if I click, there we go. We can see that the component has been rendered again. But here, this is easy to do. Okay, we don't want to do it in here. We want to do it when we trigger actually the button, but directly on the top level. So here we've got here render that appear 2 times. I'm going to explain later why in React like this we have 2 renders from the beginning. And let's click again on update name. So if I click on update name, we can see that rendered appeared again. useState, as I said to you, is attached to React, which will actually trigger the reactivity and just re-render the whole page. So with useState, you are sure to get fresh data. Okay? All right, this is good. So you can here, I imported React this way, it's more this way. There we go. So here you need to import useState all the time. Of course, you could have several states. So here I can have email, and then I would have set email, and instead I would have guillaume@gmail.com. All right. And here I would have hello here, and email, your email is, I would trigger that and I just update that, and there we go. Hello Guillaume, your email is, and here we got everything in here. So if I just remove this button here for now, we can see that I can create as many states as I want. This is exactly the example that you've got when you create a React application. You've got this counter, and as you can see on the counter, you have a number. So useState can receive any type. It can receive a string, a number, a boolean, an object, and an array. But depending on the type of the kind of useState you are going to use, you got to be safe because you can overwrite the value. So let's give another example. Let's just remove that for now. Okay, we are going to remove that. And on top here on home, I'm going to just create a subcomponent, which will be a form. And on this form here, I would have its own scope with set, email, and stuff. And down here, I'm going to call form, okay? And this form here, and I'm going just to set up, I'm just going to apply a class name here. I'm going to type border, there we go. I'm going just to do that, there we go. Here we can see that I can also trigger my function, my setter, from my useState directly inside my template. So here we can see that we got it on chain, but I could put on input, and there we go, we've got everything. Okay, but what if I would have actually the data on the parent and I would pass it on the children? Can I do it? Absolutely, we can absolutely do that. So basically what I would do here is 2 possibilities. Either I would transfer here my state directly on home, and I would pass it up here as a prop. So here I would have name, set name, and I would have email and set email. Okay, I would do that. If I do this here, I need to pass, of course, name as name, etc., etc. Okay, here it would be more like this. There we go. Okay, so here to go faster, I'm going to use the spread operator. I'm going to pass name, set name, and then email, and then set email, and we've got everything. So here I'm catching the data from the form, which is the child, with the data from the parent. So here, when I type here, we can see that we've got the data down there displayed in form, but actually the data comes from home. So basically on home up here, I could also deconstruct. I would have, for instance, name and email here on top. If I go up here, we can see that down here we got the data inside the form, which is the child component. And here we got it on the parent, which is very convenient, okay? So this is the first possibility. The second possibility would be to have instead here, let's say that we would have a state coming from the parent. So I would have guillaume@gmail.com, and there we go. We got everything. So here, when I change, here we can see that it's working perfectly fine. I'm passing my props down there directly to the inputs, and the inputs are receiving the value, and I got the on-change, which is coming up here. Okay, so what if we would like to just apply actually those values that we got up here? So let me remove that and you will understand what I will do. Let's remove all of that from here, and let's say that instead of having this here useState, we would have it on the parent, and on the parent we would have nothing. Okay, we would have just that, okay? We come back to the initial state. What if down here we would have, for instance, a person and a set person, and this person would be an object, and in this object I would have a name, which is Guillaume, and I would have an email, which is guillaume@gmail.com. And let's say that I would like to pass this person here, okay, as a prop. So I pass the prop and I would like to apply this person down here. Is it possible? Yes, absolutely. So we've got here person, and let's say that on useState, what I would like to do is to apply person.name and then person.email. This is also possible. The main difference is that we are here in two different scopes, right? When we are going to change Guillaume here, okay, it's not going to change on the parent, and I'm going to show it to you immediately. I'm going to type person name. So on person name, on parent here, name is, there we go. And here I'm going to put here on form, name is, and here I'm going to put name. There we go. Okay, so we can see that here on parent, the usual name is Guillaume, and on the form, the name is Guillaume also, because we give here from person as a prop, we give the name and the email coming from the parent. This is an issue because here in form, we are in our own scope. So here, if I put a class name BG Red 500, here we are on red, we are on a different scope. So if I put text white here, no, probably not text white, but I'm going to remove the BG red, you have understand. If I change here the name and I put John instead, we can see that on the form, John has been updated as a name, but on the parent, it's still Guillaume. Why? Because here on form, you got one scope, and on home, you got another scope. So the previous example was to show you that if you want to change the value to the parent, you got to pass all the props like this. But be safe, when you pass the person this way, here on the form, you actually make a copy here of the name of the person that you put inside name. Same for email. So you are on another scope. It would mean that from here, from this form, what you would do at the end is to update here to the API or whatever here. Let's put a class name text black, for instance. There we go. BG black text white, just to show you that this is a button. Okay, you would have to update from the API here the person with the name and email inside the form, because otherwise, even if your form is changing the value of name and email, it doesn't change the value of the person parent in that case. All right, we're gonna roll back to the previous configuration, which was to pass the name, the set name, the email, and the set email. Okay, so I'm just going to remove that. And here instead, down here, I'm going to just deconstruct that. I can have the name and set email, and I could basically rewrite everything in order for you to understand. Again, we've got our useState, which is Guillaume up here, and we've got the email and set email, which is useState guillaume@gmail.com. Okay, so instead of the person, I'm going to pass again with the spread operator the name, set name and email, and set email. There we go. Okay, so we are back in the previous configuration. Okay, so what I want to show you is that probably in some cases you would like to keep the previous state of an object or an array. So how to do this? Well, there is two possibilities. So this here is using multiple state. So we're going to take an example here, and it's going to be more like useState here, an object, and we're going to start with that object, and we're going to call it company. And then we're going to have set company. And in this object, I would have the name of the company, which would be codewithg.com. Okay. I would have the number of employees. Let's say that we would have 12. And then we would have at the end for instance, the website, okay, or URL. Let's call it URL. That would be basically https://codewithg.com. Okay, so now we got the company and we got the set company. So I'm going to pass the company down here and the set company, okay, for the example. And what I would like to do here is to have another input, and remember here I need to do exactly the same, company and set company in that case. Instead here I would have type text, okay. I would have as the placeholder company, I would have pass company in here, and I would have set company. As we can see here, company is an object. And what we would like to change only, for instance, it's the URL. So I'm going to type company.url, and there we go, we've got it in here. The problem here is that when we set the company, we push the string, which represent the URL, to the object company down there. So it's going to override company with the URL that we got up here. And this is not what we want to do. What we want to do, we want to keep employees and we want to keep name. To do so, what we need to do is to do a functional update. And for that, we need to use set company. But here, what we want to do, we want to catch the previous state. So to catch the previous state, you got to know that this setter here is giving to us an argument, which is the previous state. Okay? So what I can do here on my object is just to have here an object which represents a new object, a new company, with the previous state. Okay, and as a spread operator here, I can copy paste the previous state, which most of the time we call prev. Okay, and now what I can do is to type URL and here e.target.value. Okay, so here I need to return that object and we should be good. So if I come back here and I put here a P and company informations, and let's say that after that I would have what? I would have the company name, and I would have the company employees, and I would have the company URL. Okay, now that we did that, I can easily come back here and change only code with G and not everything. Okay, so if I remove that, we can see that I'm saving here basically the company on the top level using the previous state that we got here. Of course, something that is exactly the same is to use company itself. Okay, so here I got company itself. I can just copy paste the value, and here we can see that it's doing exactly the same result. All right. Okay, let's take a last example, and this time we are going to use an array, and this is most of the time the trickiest for a lot of people. So this is why I want to make you the demonstration. Down there we've got a members list. So we've got the getter and the setter that we pass as a prop to our form component. And here we loop through the members to show their name, and then we've got next to them a button remove. And what we would like to do is just to update the list to remove a member. And we're going to see that it's going to be directly done on the parent because we passed the setter set members. Okay, so here I'm going just to create a function onClick, sorry. And this function onClick is going to do the job, okay? So it's going to set a new value to the members. So we've got here the previous version, and it's going to set what? An array. And what we're going to do, we are going to set the previous members like this. And just to make an example, I'm going to add to start a test here string to see if it adds a real member to the list and if it updates. All right, so I'm just going to update, and when I click, we can see that here we've got remove here and the test that is appearing because every time I click, I had this element in here. So you got to be safe not to do that. It's a junior mistake. But we've got here the previous array, so we are good. Okay, so what we want to do, we want to filter the actual members list, okay? So I can just type members filter here, X, So I'm just going to type X. And here what I want to do, I want to return every member except the current one, which is the actual member that we've got up here, the actual member that we display. So we're going to say X is different from a member, and we're going to save that. So I'm going to unzoom a little bit to show you the piece of code. Every time we're going to click on click, and I'm just going to go to the line because here it's not really visible. We don't need the previous one. We want to filter members with the member, the actual member, okay? So if I come down here and I click on test, everything disappeared because test was added several times. But if I want to remove Mary, I can click here and we can see that we remove every member. If I update again my component, I still have Guillaume, John, and Mary. So here, this is normal that I have again Guillaume, John, and Mary, because here on my state, by when I initiate the component, by default, I got Guillaume, John, and Mary. So if I click on remove John disappear, and there we go. So we can see here that we can leverage the user state from React to keep the reactivity and to keep the state inside a specific scope, whatever it is on a component itself or on a subcomponent where we pass the data. And we can also see that we can leverage basic JavaScript to update our current state. So be safe, because I see a lot of people sharing states between components by using different files. Try to make them as much local as possible, because you want to be sure that the actual data that is displayed is fresh. This is the latest data that you want. This hook is essential to keep the reactivity of your application, to preserve the state across rendering, and also to trigger re-renders to update your actual application to display the right data. We're going to see later also that when you fetch data, you need to use useState to apply the actual data that you receive to the current application in order to not show to the user false information.